a world out there. One that I do not understand or have any chance of comprehending. It's dark, mysterious, frightening, yet it has been put on me to confront it. But I'm out of my league here. I need professionals. I need people who've trenched through the mud and come out on the other side smelling like roses. What I need are yaoi specialists.
Yellow.
How did you get a spotlight that can be seen from Utah?
You could have just called us, dude. You've got both of our numbers.
I need you guys' help to review a yaoi webcomic.
Is it Exorcism Academy?
No.
Tea House?
No.
Starfighter?
No, just how many of these do you know?
Enough to get me where I need to be.
It's this Korean horror yaoi webcomic.
Oh, Killing Stalking.
That's the one. I figured I could use you guys' expertise.
I mean, it's not yaoi high, so I'm game.
Alright, good, because this light thing wasn't exactly cheap.
And calling us on the phone escaped you. Why exactly?
Hell, you could have DM'd us on Twitter, or Facebook, or Discord, or...
Listen. I'm not a clever man.
What? Gay stuff in my Christian YouTube show? For shame!
So Stacie, Sam and I were talking about yaoi, as you do, and we started talking about this one comic we had all read called Killing Stalking. Now, I read it for the horror aspect, while these two heard about it from their thirsty fujoshi friends. Killing Stalking is a Korean manhwa, or as they refer to webcomics, a webtoon. It is created by artist Kugi and was hosted on Leshin Comics, who, if you are familiar with recent events, has come under scrutiny for their mistreatment towards the artists they employ.
To keep a long story short, they basically had the mindset of, no, it's fine, we'll pay you in exposure.
Yes. The phrase that fills every artist with uncontrollable, murderous rage.
Sounds like some Channel Awesome horseshit.
I'm sure that they're really sorry that the artists feel that way though.
That should not, however, deter you from reading this comic. It started to gain popularity in 2017 and it is clear to see why. With its addicting storyline and impressive art, it has won the 100 million won Grand Prize Award at the second Leshin World Comics Contest, has an average rating of 4.4 out of 5 on Anime Planet, 4.27 out of 5 on Goodreads, and has received more than 1 million hits on Singbox.
How much is a billion won?
About $5.
What?
So yeah, we're dealing with a pretty top tier webcomic.
As I mentioned before, webtoons are essentially another term for a webcomic. The Korean web portal Daum created a webtoon service all the way back in 2003, as did Naver in 2004. These services regularly release webtoons that are available for free, much like Western-based websites such as Taptastic or SmackJeeves do. The comic owes a lot of its popularity to its dark themes, displays of psychological manipulation, and depiction of physical abuse and violence.
Meaning if you're trying to read this webcomic for the smut, you're gonna be disappointed. Or disturbingly aroused.
So fair warning, we're crossing into some fucked up shit this time.
And if that is not your cup of tea, then you can go click on a, I don't know, game theory video or some shit.
Happy feet, combo combo, and
Stalking follows the young Jung Boom, an introverted young man who suffers from borderline personality disorder. During his mandatory military service, he becomes infatuated with the strapping, handsome young man Oh Sang-woo. This crush transforms into an obsession that lasts well beyond their time in the military, and Boom starts to stalk Oh Sang-woo. This leads to him breaking into his house, and just when you think that Boom is the creepiest dude ever, Oh Sang-woo one-ups him by having a tied-up woman in his basement that Sang-woo then murders.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Sang-woo captures Boom, and the story in its simplicity and its core becomes how Sang-woo then plays around with Boom and the thoughts and feelings Boom goes through, as we see him flip-flopping between wanting to escape and staying with the psycho killer of his affections. So, as you can tell, it is a very down-to-earth story. As much as a story about murders and stalkers can go, anyway. There's no spaceships, no dragons, no boot planet, no world domination. It is a nice and small scale story, and that is really refreshing to see. Especially when today there are way too many comics that feature a story where the world is hanging in the balance. It's not that that's a bad thing per se, it's just that if all you eat is steak, sometimes you can't help but crave a nice and greasy hamburger.
Calling this comic a slice of life just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, nobody's everyday life should include the things that happen in Killing Stalking.
Even so, it's best to avoid elements that seem more at home in Dragon Ball Z than a real-world setting.
I was immediately hooked by this story, as I, as you may know, have a background in psychology. Way too often you will find people over-glorifying or straight up romanticizing mental illnesses, which is something that will make me audibly groan. Like every time I hear, "Oh, Joker and Harley Quinn are so romantic," I wanna scream, "The fuck are you on?" Killing Stalking does not do this, whether it's Boom with his BPD or Sang-woo with, well, his many issues, including narcissism, psychosis, and even somewhat of an Oedipus complex. The comic showcases how terrible these disorders can be and how badly it can fuck people up, and that had me rubbing my hands together cause there were finally someone who understood how to treat mental illnesses. Like, sorry if this offends you, but if you're one of those people who think that you got a, what's it called? A head partner, a head fellow, a headmates. You're hearing voices, seek professional help.
In a lot of boy love comics, you'll see a recurring trope where one character will fall in love with someone who would otherwise be seen as abusive. It's extremely problematic and done to death. As mentioned back in the Yaoi High review, this is one of the many reasons Japanese gay men hate the yaoi genre. It fetishizes gay men and relationships that are actually incredibly toxic. But in Killing Stalking, that particular trope gets twisted into something that shows how sinister it really is.
You aren't rooting for these characters to become a couple. The abuse isn't cute. When things seem sweet between Bum and Sang-woo, the reader feels understandably nervous. Even the times where fan service is shown, it has an underlying horror to it.
In fact, Kuki has gone on record and said that Killing Stalking was never supposed to be either romantic or sexy, and are in fact making strides to make everything sexual between Boom and Sang-woo as uncomfortable as humanly possible.
Of course, there will be people out there who want them together regardless, or enjoy the abusive dynamic of their relationship.
Yeah, there will always be fans just like that. I mean, take the women for example who think that Christian Grey would be a great husband.
As the comic goes on, it's very clear that Boom wants to escape the house he's being held captive in, but at some point we start to see that even when he's offered an out, he's hesitant and will sometimes straight up go back to Sang-woo. Now, whether this is because of his fear for what Sang-woo can and will do to him is unclear, but it becomes very evident later on that Boom is actively developing Stockholm Syndrome. It can also be because of a thing people with BPD has, which is called splitting, which refers to an inability to maintain a cohesive set of beliefs about oneself and others. In fact, the comic does a great job in making every situation incredibly unpredictable, using the psychotic faults both characters have to keep the audience guessing. Will Boom escape or not? Is Sang-woo legit being nice to Boom now, or is he just playing with him? And the best part is that it is conveyed in such a way that while you're asking some of these questions, you're asking them in the stead of one of the characters. So when Sang-woo is being super nice to Boom, you're putting yourself in Boom's stead and is going, is he fucking with him now, or is he legit being nice to him?
The comic is a blast to read. Everything is so tense, especially because you never know what Sang-woo does next. But also because it never loses focus. You're always right there, dead center in the middle of this hurricane that just feels like it's spinning more and more out of control. Like, you'll be sitting down with this comic and when you look up, you realize you forgot to make dinner 3 hours ago.
I also like that it's a comic that's well aware of its audience's age and mental capacity. For a comic that deals with adult content, it also uses adult language and expects its readers to piece things together. There's a scene where the detective is in Sang-woo's house and sees a cutting board with a knife on it. Later, he glances back and notices the knife is gone. There's no voice or thought bubbles describing the knife's absence or what it means, because Kugi knows her audience isn't dumb. She assumes that they can conclude that the disappearing knife in a murder suspect's house is not a good thing.
I think I've said this exact sentence before, but it's a comic that knows just who and what its audience is, and knows just exactly how to appeal to it. Now, to tackle the elephant in the room. A big elephant, and not a particularly sexy one at that. Way back when I did my first Jack review, I had some very strong reactions to how the comic handled rape. And don't get me wrong, the comic is terrible for doing that, and I'm not about to take that statement back. But it has become evident that some of you think that you should not have rape in stories at all. And you absolutely should, but only if it's vital to your story and handled properly instead of fetishized. We can't pretend that rape isn't a very real thing, and we shouldn't just shy away from it either, much like racism, homophobia, murder, and all that edgy stuff. But don't just throw it in there cause you needed something bad to happen to a character and rape was just the first thing that came to mind. This will actively belittle the topic instead of bringing attention to it. In Killing Stalking, rape is a very apparent theme throughout the entire comic, but it's not treated as a small little thing either. It's not sexy, it's not just something that happens, it is horrible and uncomfortable and is the most unromantic thing in the world. So if you're looking for some nice and happy escapism, might want to try a different comic.
In Killing Stalking's more recent chapters, there is a sex scene between Bum and Sang-woo. But from the get-go, you know that anything that happens between them physically will likely be non-consensual or abusive, and none of it is shown in a good light.
Bum clearly experiences trauma throughout these scenes, and even in cases where he's the instigator, he'll often hesitate or grow nervous because he doesn't know if things will play out the way he wants. And usually, they don't. Sang-woo is a narcissist. He focuses on his pleasure alone. He thrives on the power and control he holds over Bum.
We actually struggled coming up with something negative to say about the writing of Killing Stalking. Everything just seemed so well written that we couldn't really come up with much. Like, there's some unfortunate tropes that the comic falls into, but the only real big flaw I can see with the comic that's worth talking about is the segments that has to do with the detective Yang Xiongbae. And it's not that he's a bad character or his involvement in the story isn't interesting, it's more that he kind of feels a little contrived. His story is a little too well-fitting for the role he's put in, and his segments are pretty long in the tooth. It gets interesting when he's in active confrontation with Boom and Sang-woo, but outside of that, it's pretty dry and boring. But honestly, that's just when you actively try and sit down and find something to complain about.
Holy shit.
Okay, so we've covered a bunch of comics lately that's really aced their art, but Killing Stalking is really up there with the best of them. It looks so legit like a professional manga or manhwa that Sam actively had to sit down and tell me, no dude, this is a webcomic. So many artists will know how to draw something that looks fantastic, but not why or how it should be used in the scene of a comic. Killing Stalking doesn't have that issue. Not only is the art phenomenal, but its use is equally as impressive. Like, if you're like me and you enjoy diving into and analyzing art, this is an all-you-can-eat buffet.
First of all, the comic makes great use of color palettes without making it seem unnatural and forced, which can be hard in a realistic setting, where if you put in too much of one color, it kind of loses its realistic feel. Boom uses an almost sickly dark green color palette that kind of makes you feel nauseous looking at it, befitting his weak and dirty look, of course. Sangwoo is a more white and gray color palette, which fits the way Boom and others perceive him. He's like a knight in shining armor, who's pure and beautiful. The true genius is how subtly this is conveyed.
Sangwoo and Bum all change clothes throughout the whole thing. At one point, Bum even wears something that looks like it came out of Chris Chan's closet, but it still keeps that tint and the dominant color palette without being intrusive.
And that's not even the most genius part. What truly left us with our mouths agape was when we found out certain things about a gradient tint that sometimes showed up in the borders of the frames. This tint would be there every now and again and show when things got dangerous or sexual, to kind of giving an idea of the mood of the scene. But sometimes it'd be there for what we figured at first was no good reason. After some digging, we found out, however, that this was when Boom was imagining things. Disassociation is a symptom of BPD, which is a way of coping with very intensely emotional situations, by shutting down or separating from the experience. And at first, it is very clear when Boom is diving into these delusions, but as time goes on, it becomes harder and harder to tell as the tint disappears. And this is an excellent way of showing that even Boom is having an issue telling reality and his delusions apart, most likely due to the increasing amounts of stress he's constantly put under.
And it's subtle. That's the best thing about it.
Another thing that this comic does better than most is the use of its construction to its benefit. To prove a point, let me ask the aspiring comic creators out there, where do you think viewers would be reading your comic? On a PC? A tablet? A phone? If it's a tablet or a phone, should it then be read in portrait or landscape?
And even if you pass this first hurdle, what's the reason behind your decision? This might sound like I'm not giving you guys a lot of credit, but I'll bet my left nut that barely 10% of you guys out there has even bothered giving this any legit thought. After all, it's rather boring stuff. Not quite as sexy as doing the actual comic. But Cookie did give this some thought, as the majority of people reading webtoons do so on their phones, typically when in transit. As of such, the comic's been constructed with that in mind, having a far more vertical format than normal, and its frames have been split apart in such a way that when Cookie wants to draw out the tension and suspense, they separate the frames further and further apart, so you kinda have to scroll further to get the answer. So you're sitting there with bated breath as you wait to find the conclusion of something. This works really well compared to Western comics, where sometimes you'll have the conclusion within your peripheral while you're reading the setup. This is why good artists put the setup on the right page if they want to draw out suspense.
And now, class, why would you do that?
Because you have to turn the page to find the conclusion.
10 points to Gryffindor.
But I'm a Slytherin.
And I'm a Hufflepuff.
You're both huge nerds is what you fucking are.
A thing some people would probably complain about is how sometimes there's no real background and how the pedestrians don't actually have faces. And to that the question then becomes, does it even really matter? If we see a road, a fence and some light poles, we can tell we are outside and we don't need to see a full face to tell whether or not a person is a man or a woman, or if they're angry or not. In fact, considering this comic is told through Boom's perspective a lot of the time, it makes sense there's a lot of things that don't really have any details. Because Boom is so obsessed with Sangwoo that that's the only thing he really pays attention to. If that's the case, that's a genius way of cutting down on stuff to do while giving an in-universe reason for it.
But that's just a theory. A comic theory? Oh, fuck yeah, this is the shit! Kill me now!
It is, however, with the background that we literally had Stacie yell out, "Aha! I found something negative!" And it became more and more apparent the further we dived into the comic. Killing Stalking's backgrounds are done by using a program in which you kinda make a 3D environment and then you can kinda just alter the color, saturations, and how blurry it is, and boom, suddenly you got a background that fits the style.
It's not like building a house in Sims, only it's a much more detailed program, and the program isn't owned by the devil.
The problem with this is because it's such a fast and easy process, there's not necessarily that much thought and care put into it. This can result in backgrounds that look fine at a glance, but then you pay attention and suddenly there's a floating coffee table suspended in midair.
And at first, this is just funny, but then later it happens more often, and you kind of start seeing that things were rushed for the sake of deadlines, and they didn't really have people fine-combing the comic.
Given, it's a small thing. It's not like the furniture's just flying all around the room like it's goddamn Azeroth. Why the fuck would you need that?
Ultimately, the art in Killing Stalking is nothing short of fantastic. There's a remarkable attention to details when there needs to be, its composition is really well thought out and used to the comic's advantage. The expressions used in the comic also helps properly conveying any and all emotions, which is incredibly important when you are refused an insight in Sang-woo's head, and does have to tell everything he feels and thinks from his facial expressions. The comic even avoids the typical yaoi stigma of poor anatomy, and the characters look like actual people instead of 3 children stacked on top of one another in a trench coat.
I went to the stock market today. I did a business.
Dude, do you want it?
Don't mind if I do!
Okay. So, time for me to finally put my education to good use. So, first of all, let me just put something out there. If you think you understand psychology and mental illness just cause you've seen it on TV, like on Dr. Phil or some shit, you're wrong. If you think that there's something cool or interesting about having a mental illness, you're wrong. If you think making light of actual mental illnesses to boost your own popularity or ego isn't a bad thing, you are wrong. We live in a world today where people will pretend to be goddamn schizophrenic for the sake of being interesting. If you want an idea of what harm that can cause, let me ask if you ever had anyone around you say they were suicidal and you then went, oh, they're probably just saying this to get attention. There you go. The moment we can even think people will use something this serious as means to get attention, that's when we know we have fucked up. See this chuckle fuck right here? He thought he was cool because he was mentally unstable. He didn't even want to get help because all this fuckhead wanted was attention. And if he got help, that possibly removed the one thing he figured made him interesting. And because people around him just thought he acted out, no bigger deal was made out of it. This ended with this cunt going out and killing 2 people before taking his own life, because he believed killing himself would make him get reincarnated as a ghost girl in the Danny Phantom universe. And no, I am not making that up.
Mental illness is not a joke. It's not a fad, and it's not an accessory you can just put on yourself or your characters for the sake of making you or your characters interesting or deep or whatever the fuck. It's a very serious thing and should be treated as such. Which is what this comic does.
Okay, so with that out of the way, let me tell you guys about a thing called dichotomos. It comes from the Greek word dichotomia, which means dividing in two. This is a symptom of many mental illnesses, including borderline personality disorder, which our dear protagonist Boom suffers from. This term is used in many different things, but when used in mental illnesses, it is when you see the world as either one thing or another. So, say if a guy is nice to you, it can, for a person suffering from this, mean only either that the guy wants to fuck you, or they're using you. There's a million other reasons why the guy is being nice to you, but when you're suffering from this, these are the only 2 things it can be. Keep this in mind as we dig into Boom.
And also, just as a heads up, nobody in this comic is likable.
But that is very much intentional.
Boom is a young, scrawny guy. He's very insecure and has exhibit clear signs of being suicidal. He's pretty naive, but surprisingly resourceful and smart, as we see in one of our first scenes with him where he uses flour to find out the button Sang-woo has used on his door's lock. Due to having been abused by his uncle, bullied by his classmates, and then abused again by Sang-woo, he has gotten into the mindset that he is disgusting. In fact, I dare say that Boom has been abused so much that he doesn't know the difference between abuse and actual affection. He has a very frail and feminine body, which is probably why Sang-woo uses him as a substitute for his mother. Frankly, Boom is just a tragic story, and it becomes even more tragic when this all escalates as a result of Sang-woo's influences.
Boom is a clear example to what can happen to someone if they are suffering from some kind of mental illness that isn't treated and instead left festering in a super stressful environment.
Narcissistic, sadistic, Oedipus complex, schizoid personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, superiority complex, and probably a slew of other mental illnesses is what we can use to describe Oh Sang-woo, the primary antagonist of Killing Stalking. Sang-woo is a confident manipulator who uses people to his own means, usually just for the sake of pleasure and what he considers fun. Early on in the comic, he captures Boom, and it becomes immediately apparent that he's only keeping Boom alive out of two reasons. Well, maybe one isn't as immediately apparent as the other, but the main reason is because he enjoys fucking around with Boom. He likes to toy with him, watching him squirm. Doing this, he kinda puts himself on a pedestal above others, feeding into his superiority feeling. But as time progresses, he starts seeing Boom as something more.
And if you thought I was going to say lover, then boy are you wrong.
Oedipus was a mythical Greek king of Thebes, a tragic hero in Greek mythology. Oedipus accidentally fulfilled a prophecy that he would end up killing his father and marrying his mother, thereby bringing disaster to his city and family. After he found out that he'd just banged his mom and killed his dad, he cut out his own eyes so he'd never have to witness what he'd done ever again. This is the main inspiration for why you in a lot of horror imagery will see people with their eyes gouged out. From this was named the Oedipus complex, a psychoanalytic theory introduced by everyone's Sigmund Freud back in 1899. Basically, if you have an Oedipus complex like Sang-woo has, you wanna fuck your parents of the opposite sex, and you'll have a sense of rivalry from the other parent. Due to Sang-woo's mother being dead, he starts to see Boom as a replacement for his dead mother. We see this from how he dresses up Boom in his mother's clothes, to how he sits him at the table his mother used to sit, and even at one point where he digs under Boom's shirt in a wish to return to his mom's safe and warm womb.
What can I say? Sometimes psychology is fucked up.
Boom and Sang-woo are easily the characters that get the most attention in the comic, as the story revolves around them. And it is really cool with how consistent and on point all these different psychoses are. Unfortunately, that's really all there is to say about Boom and Sang-woo to me. The characters are consistent and well written, but maybe it's just because of me and my education, but I started caring way more about the different psychoses they had than the actual characters.
That's a very personal flaw, don't worry, I'm well aware of that.
There's also Min Jun, Sang-woo's classmate, who is head over heels for him. Despite the short time we get to see her, she actually manages to exhibit a lot of personality, with how she can be kind of outgoing, but isn't too good with big crowds.
She's very friendly and cute on the surface, but inside she can be slightly cruel and selfish. It just goes to show how Kugi can make these really layered and deep characters without giving them much screen time.
It's important to note that character depth doesn't necessarily equal how much screen time they have.
Next up we got Young Shongbae, and while we're at it, huge shout out to our friend Cloudy and his friend Tracy for helping us finding out how to pronounce these names, as none of us speak a word of Korean. Yang Shongbae is a former investigator who has been demoted to being a patrolling police officer. Yang here is actually a really interesting character, as we see different sides of him as we see him work. As noted by his superior, he pries too much into investigations and likes to think that there's more under the surface. It just so happens he's right this time about Boom and Sang-woo, which is a good thing seeing he used to investigate the murder of Sang-woo's parents way back when, but couldn't find anything conclusive. I have to admit I got a soft spot for criminal investigators, and it's so cool to see Yang and his thought process as he finds clues and pieces them together. It's also really cool to see that what is both one of Yang's strengths is also one of his major flaws. It helps shaping him as this nice believable character, even if his circumstances to be in the comic is a little too convenient.
It's like he's tailor-made for this case. It'd be like, oh no, the aliens are attacking and the only way to stop them is by being bald and play them at a passable level and Dragon Ball FighterZ while yelling out profanities. Where will we ever find someone like that?
Other than that, there's not really a ton of characters, and that's not a bad thing. The comic is focused on Boom and Sang-woo's quote-unquote relationship? Just as the story is confined to their own little bubble in Song-woo's home, so is the comic's cast of characters.
The only people that get any real screen time are the people they let into this bubble, which, coincidentally enough, happens to be Song-woo's home. The story is focused on these two, and as a result, not too many people are introduced. This keeps the focus on characters who matter.
It's like when you're in love. The only person that truly matters is that one other person.
But they're not in love.
Shut up.
The writing is an 8. It is a great, focused, well-constructed story that knows exactly what it wants to tell, and it does so greatly. The art is a 9. The art in itself is probably an 8 with how stunning and great it looks, but Cookie's ability to also use the presentation to their advantage just gives it an extra oomph. The characters are a 7. These are some great characters, but I personally feel they could have used a little extra to really flesh them out. Ultimately, the reading experience was a solid 8. If you want a chill down your spine during the hot summer, then go pick up Stalking. And even if that's not what you want, still pick it up cause it's just an amazing read.
So how about that? A good Yaoi comic.
See, it doesn't have to all be miserable.
I don't know, most of it felt pretty miserable.
You know what I mean.
Anyway, we will see you guys in the next Webcomic Relief.
Take care!
Till next time.
I've always liked to play with fire. Watching as the flames get higher. I've always liked to play with
rite of passage, classic habit, matching the gas tank. Ooh, that's pressure. Unstoppable, legendary animal. Digital justice, now you gotta know what's hailed to the king and queen of the ruckus. Young money wired, no denying. I've always liked to play with fire.
Hey gang, hope you guys are enjoying this lovely sunny spring that we're having. I've personally, just been taking a lot of walks and jogging and stuff. It's been really lovely. With that said, I have not just been sitting around doing nothing, despite how long you have waited for this episode in particular. There has been a lot of things that got in the way, which is par for the course when you are cooperating with someone. Sometimes it's really hard to make your schedules sync up, and especially when I live in Denmark, and Sam and Stacie, who were so great to have in this episode, and I really want to personally thank them for being here, live in Utah. So there is like a massive time difference, and basically half of the time when they are going to bed, I am getting up. So it's been pretty hard to get this thing working, but I hope you enjoyed it all the same. As a result of this long wait, and because I was a lot of the time unable to work on this particular script, I have actually not just finished the next Webcomic Relief script, I have also recorded most of it. So you can expect another Webcomic Relief episode maybe even before May is over. It's really all up to Hugo when he finishes the title card. And as a last little note, we are currently thinking about when to do the the next Webcomic Relief charity stream. We are currently thinking about doing something in July. So if any of you know of any charities that are running in July, we can hopefully do something along with them. So if any of you know anything about that, please throw me either a tweet on @Hellraiser or send me a mail at riser@mail.com. And we will, as soon as we have picked a date, we will throw up a video where all sorts of artists and other creators and stuff can apply, and we will see about having a little more structure to it this time, but that's a discussion for a different video. So for now, let's just look at all these amazing people who have helped supporting this show and are currently making it so that Webcomic Relief is now my job, because no one else is hiring where I'm currently living. So huge thanks to these guys, because without them I wouldn't be able to pay rent. First of all, we got Neo. Neo doesn't have anything he wants me to push, so just know he's a real OG. Nicholas Knudsen. Nicholas wants me to push the YouTuber Fredrik Knudsen, no relation, who I personally subscribe to too. The guy makes great documentary style videos on all sorts of internet oddities. Go check him out. Amocin. Amocin is working on a comic called Druids, which is a mature themed fantasy comic in the world of Warcraft. If you're interested in a more mature story from that world, go check it out. I'm a Moron. I'm a Moron wants me to push his comic Doom Ones, which is a really meta Chosen One story with a twist. The link for it will be in the description. Alix doesn't have anything they want me to push yet, so just know they are the dopest, nicest person ever. Hitori the artist. Hitori could really use a fridge, especially now where things are heating up, and you can help him get one through both commissions, which are really good, Patreon, or his all-new coffee account. So if you want some awesome art and help a brother out, the links are in the description. Rojaru. Rojaru wants me to push his friend Zeevkesly, who is currently living in Japan, but is raising money to move to America. They sell animal pins, stickers of their design, and has or will open commissions for tattoos or just normal commissions. The link is in the description. The Bonsai. Bonsai wants me to push his buddy Lintire, who is currently running a video game review show on YouTube called Doghouse Reviews. They are snappy, on point, informative, and he's funny in a way only he can be. So go check it out. Lorayo-kun. Lorayo-kun is making an adult webcomic based around Zootopia called Hybrid Test. If you want some spicy furry stuff, go check it out. Shane Asher. Shane is working on a webcomic called The Strays. This comic tickles a personal fancy of mine, which is a superhero comic with anthropomorphic characters. It's a comic with a lot of charm, so check it out. Nana Newcomb. Nana has rebooted her comic Blackbird Miss Murder. If you want more adult theme and really thought-provoking superhero comics, Nana has you covered. Kathy Catlin. Max Sovereign has a comfortably average life planned out until his engagement implodes. Angry and disillusioned, he quits graduate school and moves away to start over. Ironically, he finds someone from his past who he thought he'd never see again. While rebuilding their relationship, Max joins a band on a whim and begins chasing fame and fortune. In 2040's Denver, however, Max and his new friends face more than the usual sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Nate Tunes. Nate wants me to push his friend's Twitch channel, as they are currently working on a fighting game called Super Psychic Royale, as both the artist and animator. So check it out. You guys know how I like fighting games, so I'm gonna be checking this one out. And also a huge shout out to Henry Volt, Sebastian Venborg, Jordan Berg, Sela Bauman, Stacy Pitt, K.H. Vaffiel, Kawai Lee, Shiv, and Driga of Adrian. And also a super huge thank you to all lovely people that you see on screen right now. If you want to support the show, change my life and make it so I can live off of YouTube and entertaining people, please go to my Patreon. Here you can donate anything you want every month and you will get a ton of awesome rewards for it. Just go to www.patreon.com/riser. You can also go to TeePublic and get your hands on some of the new Webcomic Relief merch. The link is in the description. If you don't want to support the show financially, at least think about liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or sharing your favorite Webcomic Relief episode with your friends. I'll see you guys at the next Webcomic Relief. Take care.